it's Adam from LUCIDPIXUL, and welcome back. Now today, I'd actually like to offer you a little bit of career advice. But before I continue, I want to preface this by saying that everybody's situation is subjective. It's different. It's situational. And don't regard this as the solution every single time. As employees, as artists, as people in general, we need to be able to adapt ourselves to different situations. So there's no one-stop shop piece of advice that's going to solve every one of these situations the same way. Sometimes you have to be a little tougher. Sometimes you have to loosen the reins a little bit. Okay? The other thing I'd like to say is that this advice is coming from a place of, I'm embarrassed to say, experience. And you're going to see why I'm laughing about that in a second. This is kind of a do as I say, not as I do type of situation, because I want you to avoid making some of the mistakes I have made in my own career. I feel, looking back, although at the time I felt that my actions were justified, looking back, I realized that it painted a very false image of who I am and what I represent. And furthermore, it damaged my reputation, perhaps to a certain degree, although I think it was just interpreted as I was a beginner, I was an amateur, and it is a very typical, the mistakes that I made were very typical, inexperienced professionals type of mistakes to make. But looking back, now that I'm a little bit older, I realize I would have handled it very differently. And I handle it differently nowadays because I've learned that it's the big picture, it's the end result, and it's what you, quote, represent professionally to others that ultimately matters. The main topic I want to talk about is how you handle working professionally with employers, with clients, with colleagues, etc. And it's the type of stance that you take in these different situations. And a lot of the mistakes that I made throughout the years, not to blame other people for my own actions. I'm entirely accountable for my own actions. But I was in an environment where I was being influenced, where I had other professionals that I trusted in, that I confided in, that I feel lived a very different situation than I did and encouraged me to react in different situations and or conflicts or disputes in, I feel, a far too aggressive way. And by aggressive, I just mean taking a little bit too much of an unbending stance on certain things. So what do I mean by all this? I'm alluding to a lot of stuff, but I'm not getting to the point here. In different situations, one of the things that I felt, and this is something that a lot of artists who reach out to me for advice on how to handle clients and how to handle directors or job offers, I can sense it in their tone. And it's a kind of, how do I avoid getting screwed as an artist? How do I avoid being shortchanged? How do I avoid being mistreated? And by mistreated, I don't mean in the same sense as the video about Blizzard that I posted a couple of weeks ago, where I was talking about abusive behavior and mistreatment. No, I just mean mistreated in the taken for granted, in the not having your work appreciated, in the not necessarily getting paid what you feel you are entitled to getting paid, not getting the type of recognition that you feel you deserve, etc., etc. That kind of stuff. I'm not talking about abuse. That's a totally different story. And with regards to that, I recommend you checking out my video on Blizzard, my response to that whole fiasco. I think that addresses it in a much more direct manner. The tone that I get is very reflective of the tone that I had, and it's also reflective of a certain type of fear, a fear of not getting paid enough, a fear of being naive, a fear of not being a strong enough business person and not making a stance and saying, this is what I feel I deserve, and no, I'm not going to accept yada, yada, yada. And that fear comes from, ultimately, I feel, a distrust in, quote, the system. And is that generally when money comes into the picture, that people behave at their worst, that people are willing to scam, people are willing to cheat, people are willing to shortchange. And there's a lot of truth to that, isn't there? With a lot of money, very often comes a lot of stinginess, can come exploitation of different people. However, looking back at my career, thinking about where I was at the particular point in time in my career, my particular level of expertise, my level of education, I was very often encouraged to take a kind of, no, I deserve this much, and sorry, final offer. And I would demand pay that may be a little bit more by the books reasonable. But ultimately, my unbending attitude put me in a position of refusing offers that I could have benefited from. Refusing offers that weren't the end of the world. They might have been a little cheaper than other people might offer, but ultimately I was kind of just turning things down because I felt that I shouldn't allow myself to get shortchanged, and that was that. And I walked away from that situation. Furthermore, I was also asking for something before I really proved myself as an artist. I hadn't yet produced any work for them. I didn't present myself as being an asset of any kind to the company. I was just this guy walking off the street saying, this is how much I feel I'm entitled to, and sorry, final offer. And when an employer, put yourself in their position. If you're an employer, be it a studio or whatever, if you're an employer and you make an offer to somebody and they're very demanding on the money, what you're ultimately really presenting to them is that money is the most important thing, which it wasn't. Money's never been the most important thing to me. Money's never been a motivator, but if you think about it, if my personality changes, if I go from being really nice to being very stiff-necked as soon as the issue of money comes up, you can tell that I'm very heavily emotionally invested in the topic of money. Now, I do believe in getting paid. I do believe in getting paid fairly, but I think there's a little bit of wiggle room. There's a little bit of flexibility there for the sake of having a bit of empathy for the person who's employing you. And furthermore, think about what it is ultimately that you're gaining from working in a studio like that. I'll give you a couple of examples of situations of studios that gave me an offer that was not a good offer. And I might have spoken about this in the past. Companies that can't pay you right away, or they pay you really, really, really shit. Like you can't even buy a pack of gum type of garbage money. A bit of an exaggeration there, but right. It's just like asking $20 for an illustration type of thing. But we're going to be showing off your work to the curling club, the local curling club, and there's a lot of people there, and you could find yourself some work that way, or I know important people, and you're going to be getting exposure potentially to these very important people. That's a flat out no to me. Unless I am being hand delivered, unless my art is being hand delivered to somebody, a well-known established client to me, that, and a guarantee of this, that I know is very crucial to the success of my career, maybe some like art director or something like that I know, or a studio that I know is very, very much in the direction I want to go. And it's not just an empty promise from Joe Schmo. It's actually a real legitimate thing that's provable, that's demonstrable. Then I might be willing to be a little bit more flexible in regards to pay. Does that mean I'm willing to accept garbage pay? No, of course not. But, as a trained professional, and if I'm new in the industry and somebody's offering me, if minimum wage, let's say, was $12 an hour and they were offering me $17 an hour or $15 an hour, it's not substantially above minimum wage. We're not talking, established professional wages. But hey, this is a portfolio piece. This is something, this is a notch in my belt. This is a CV thing that I can use to flex my experience. And that has value. I'll give you an example. And I've brought it up. I've even brought it up in exactly the same context as I'm bringing it up right now. I've argued that working for Electronic Arts was one of the most shit companies I've ever worked for. And they treated people like shit there. Not Blizzard shit, but they're crappy employers. I'll put it to you that way. Not everybody, of course, but I'm just saying there's, the top of the food chain at EA, the big head honchos, not the people who I worked directly with, but the way that company's managed is complete shit. And everybody knows it. I mean, it's universal knowledge that it's a garbage company to work for. Regardless, I worked at EA. Wink, wink. Right? I know that. You know that. Electronic Arts is a world famous game production company. They work on some of the biggest AAA game titles in the world. Yes, they're complete douchebags. They have their company structure and their management structure and the way they acquire and digest and vomit out other well-established companies like Locusts is an entirely different story. But through all that exploitation, they've achieved some pretty memorable titles. And it made your ears perk up. That name drop that I can throw at you does hold weight in the industry, doesn't it? Working on a Disney show. I mean, I very much preferred working on the Disney show. It was much better employers. And I worked for a great team. And I loved my boss and, my colleagues and everything like that. But was it my favorite job? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. Was it my best paid job? No, it wasn't my best paid job either. It was okay. I got the bills paid. It's fine. I was comfortable. I wasn't rolling in dough. EA they'll throw boxes of money at you just to get your attention because they're paying for you to shut up and just put up with the crap that they're going to throw at you. Disney was a more reasonable paycheck and a more reasonable treatment, but it wasn't by any stretch of the imagination my best paid job. It wasn't my favorite job. It was just another job. It was good. But made your ears perk up, didn't it? These are names. This is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. But I could name 10 companies I've worked for and you'd go, huh? Who's that? And those same companies early on in my career offered me exposure. And I still haven't seen it 20 years later. I never will. It's a naive thing to think that exposure is ever going to pay your paycheck. But if I'm getting experience, I'm getting a little bit of exposure, loosen up a little bit. Don't be so hard-necked. Now, 9 times out of 10, if you're working for most reputable companies, they'll pay you a decent salary because usually companies like that they're public and their salaries are public. So if there's a stink, shit gets around. Look what happened with, for instance, Wizards of the Coast for Magic the Gathering, right? Or any Wizards of the Coast product. Eventually, at a certain point, artists just got fed up of being paid garbage payouts for cards that were making a ton of money. And eventually they took it to Twitter. ArtPact, rest in peace, ArtPact. I love them to pieces. But ArtPact, at the time when it was still active, helped to get the momentum going on protests, and people made a public stink about it. And then within weeks, the salary quintupled, and the artists started getting a decent, supportable paycheck, where before they were paying complete shit. Probably around $250-$300 a card, which is absolute garbage. They were more public, so their payout was a lot better. A lot of other trading card companies, a lot of other fantasy art companies did not follow suit, and they still pay shit payouts. They still pay garbage money to their artists. That said, hey, if it's a stepping stone in your career and you need a little bit of extra side cash and you get more efficient at art and you get paid a little bit better per card, yeah, it's not great. But that kind of a company does add weight to your experience. It does make a difference, and it can help you build. Should they be paying their artists more? Absolutely yes, without a doubt. But I might bend my own moral compass a little bit. I might loosen the reins a little bit for something like that. But for the Hoboken auto trader, No, I won't, because who knows, who cares who they are? That kind of a name does not hold any weight in today's society, in today's art field. Nobody will even pay attention to a name like that. So if you're going to ever work for a company like that, it needs to at least be a salary that you can live off of, that can support you. If you're new at your career and it's a smaller studio and they don't have a huge budget like somebody like EA, it doesn't need to be a six-figure salary. Relax. It's fine. If your bills are getting paid and you're eating, you're fine. And you're building your portfolio and getting a little bit of professional experience. I don't have any qualms about directing professionals in that direction. Okay? The other thing, and this is a little bit more, there's a little bit more stress, a little bit more tense related to this, but it's related to the same topic. And that is when there's conflict, when there's somebody in the studio that you're working for, a director that you're working for, where they're rubbing you the wrong way. They are not the kindest. They are not respecting your artwork. They are not abusive. We're not talking about abuse. If abuse is a whole different ballgame. I have zero tolerance for abuse. But if it's just a general shitty, maybe a bit of cutthroatiness, a little bit of back talk, a little bit of, a little bit of gossip at the water fountain type of shit. I feel when I was in situations like this, I was very often around people that lived very different lives, had very different realities with regards to their career, and had to, under their circumstances, adopt a little bit more of a no tolerance policy when it came to conflict, came to stress, and took on a very kind of combative type of don't put up with that bullshit type of response to it. So I respected their advice and I followed suit. It felt very out of character for me. And by out of character, and I'm not trying to say, oh, I'm so pure, I'm so nice, I'm such a good guy that, I'm acting so out of character, right? No, I don't mean it like that. I just mean it was rubbing me the wrong way. I felt like I was using an energy. I was creating a dynamic that I didn't feel I could live up to. I'm not a shark. I'm not an aggressive person by nature. And I really don't like living in a state of conflict and stress. I can't get up in the morning and feel comfortable with my situation, be it in a personal relationship or be it in a professional relationship, where I feel that there's tension, where I feel like there's difficulty. And I put myself in that position by taking a little bit more of a hard-assed stance, because I thought that was the quote right thing to do. It would have been the right thing to do if I was in the right type of career and if I was the right type of person. You have to act in character. You have to be true to yourself, and you have to respect the type of career that you're in. I'm a fantasy illustrator. Fantasy illustrators and CrossFit trainers or bodybuilders are two completely different demographics of human being. And a behavior, what works for The Rock, is not going to work for a fantasy illustrator necessarily, unless that's the kind of personality you have. But you have to be true to your personality. And to me, my advice to you is react in conflict. React in times of stress in the way that feels truest to you. Because in a situation like that, if you're a little bit more extroverted or a little bit more introverted, if you're a little bit more outspoken and chatty, or if you're a little bit more quiet, get to the point type of person, you are functioning within an energy that you have full control over. And if somebody comes at you in an aggressive way, if somebody comes onto you very strong, and you react and try to react strong in response to level the playing field, what you're doing ultimately is pulling yourself out of your comfort zone and allowing them to control the pitch of the conversation, allowing them to control the energy and the direction that this conversation goes. They live and breathe in this energy 24 hours a day. That is their wavelength. It's not yours. And when I found that I tried to take on the same level of forwardness, the same level of aggressiveness towards them that they were with me, because I was afraid of being overpowered, I put myself in a heightened state of anxiety. And when you're in a heightened state of anxiety, because you're feeling a lack of control, usually anxiety comes from a lack of control, I ultimately started to make stupid decisions, and I started to get scared, and I started to put my foot in my mouth. So how has that changed? How am I different today? Well, number one is, and I think this is kind of really personal to me, but you might be able to relate to this as well. I have learned, I had been taught in the past to prepare for the worst. Now I prepare for the best. I expect the best from others. I always make a point of assuming I'm dealing with a fair and just and thoughtful person. I don't expect them to be trying to get the most out of me for the least money. I don't expect them to be exploiting me. In fact, if you think about it, you don't really need to prepare yourself for being exploited, because when it happens, you know right away. When somebody's trying to take advantage of you, it's pretty obvious. But when you overly prepare for being taken advantage of, when there's no proof that that's actually going to happen, you are creating a tone, you're creating an energy, and you're walking into a space with a heightened sensitivity and a heightened anxiety to a conflict that may never have existed or ever had a risk of existing in the first place. And by creating that energy, you are silently accusing somebody else of doing something they haven't even done yet. You are looking at them, the tone of your voice, the way you walk into a room, the way you shake their hand, the type of eye contact that you make, the way you sit down, your body language, all of that stuff has a very maybe overt or maybe very gentle undercurrent of don't fuck with me. And people are incredibly sensitive to that. If somebody walks into the room with even the slightest hint, the slightest zest of distrust, I can feel it. Now, as an employer, being somebody who would give interviews and the person who would ask people things, or as a teacher when I'm dealing with different students, I make it my point to make other people feel comfortable, for them to be able to drop their shoulders and take a deep breath and say, relax, it's fine. You're in a safe place. But that might be a little bit less predictable if you're walking into a conference room with a bunch of strangers, a bunch of employers in suits and ties looking all badass and shit. Walk into that room. I walk into that room, and I encourage you to walk into that room expecting to like and trust everybody in it. Walk in expecting to be treated fairly. Because one of the things I've learned, and I've said before in the past, people become exactly what you accuse them of being. And if I was to give you the opposite expression, I would say accuse people of what you want them to become. So if I think about it, if you were raised with somebody who always accused you of being stupid, or if you were raised by somebody who always accused you of being inconsiderate, or if you were raised by somebody who was always accusing you of being aggressive, in a moment of vulnerability, that's exactly how you're going to behave, because you're constantly preoccupied with being stupid, with being thoughtless, with having an explosive temper, etc. So when you're vulnerable and you're pissed off, that's exactly how you'll behave. And if you walk into a room expecting an employer to rip you off, whether you say it or not, people can see it in your eyes. People can hear it in the very gentle little shifts in tone in your voice. And that will ultimately lead to a more tense exchange. And if you combine that with a very unbending personality, you're pretty much setting the tone with your employer or your director or your client or your colleague or whoever, or your potential future sweetheart, that you might be a bit of a handful to deal with. And that's just going to let off unnecessarily stressful, tense energy. Chances are they're going to probably choose the person who's not like that. I walk into a room, I have an interaction with other people, and I walk in expecting to get along. I walk in expecting to have a positive experience. Being as reasonable as possible. When you approach negotiation, approach it not as a no, final offer. If you're not a hard ass, if you're not somebody who thrives in heavy negotiations and debates, you're going to be out of your element and you're going to be stressed out and they're going to walk all over you, or they're just going to say this person doesn't know how to deal professionally and whatever. You're going to exude an air of lack of confidence and lack of experience either way. When you walk into the room, be reasonable, be friendly, and expect the best. When it comes to conflict, expecting the best from people is also a really good thing, because it's very easy to paint people as good and evil. It's very easy to paint somebody as a villain. Somebody said something that rubs me the wrong way. They're, quote, an asshole. What have I just done? I've taken them and I've pigeonholed them into a category now. Now they've been plucked out of the potentially friend and now they've been put into the enemy category. So every time I see them walking by, I'm always going to look at them and treat them like a piece of shit, or I'll gossip behind their back. Or when there's when I have one of my colleagues over, I'm going to gossip about them. Oh, isn't she a bitch? Right? No. Always make a point of creating positive relationships. If somebody seems to rub you the wrong way, what I do is I walk right up to them. I'm not a total introvert there, I'm also older, so I'm not that afraid to approach people and I'll say, I feel like there's something up. I really don't want to be on bad terms with you. I really think you're awesome. I love the time we've spent together. You've got an incredible amount of talent, but I just feel so weird about what's been going on, and I don't want to walk around feeling tense around you. If there's anything, talk to me about it. I really suck at conflict. I really suck at hating people. I'd much rather get along with you. Is there anything going on? And if they're like, no, there's nothing, it's fine. Then what do? Do I take it personally and then I go, fuck, they're just being difficult. I can't deal with somebody like that. Instead, I'll externalize it and I'll say, okay, I can see you don't want to talk about it. There's nothing. No, that's fine. It's fine. I don't mean to be pushy, but do know that if there's anything you feel uncomfortable about, you can always come and talk about it. I'm right there. I'm 2 doors down. Come and talk to me about it. And what I'm doing is I'm always setting a stage for friendship. I'm always setting a stage for a positive outcome of it. But if they're quiet, if they're introverted, if they don't want to talk about it, if they have trust issues, that's their business. That's their situation. I just make my position nice and clear that I have no intention on being your enemy. I want to get along with you as long as we both shall live, till death do us part. That's my goal. If you want to fuck me over, if you keep trying to fuck me over, if you keep trying to screw me over or cut my throat or steal my work or whatever, then I'll call you out on it every time and I'll say, hey, I don't want to have this kind of exchange with you. I don't. I want to get along with you, so don't do that. Notice that's very different from me saying, hey, who do you think you're talking to? You don't talk to me like that. That's me trying to control somebody else's behavior. That's me telling them what to do. People don't like to be told what to do. Instead, I tell them, no, I don't want to have that kind of relationship with you. You matter too much to me. And let them know that they're cared for. Let them know that they're important. Let them know that they're not just another argumentative colleague, that they're a human being that have a heart and a soul. They have a life, they have needs, they have feelings, they have desires, and that you can empathize with that. And that you want the best out of your relationship. Some people don't want anything to do with it. Some people love conflict, but I guarantee you 9 people out of 10, I've been in this situation many, many times. 9 people out of 10 will walk up to you one day after they've had a smoke and they've chilled they had a brandy and a smoke and they've chilled the fuck out, and they come back and say, I'm sorry, I kind of expected you to be a little bit different. I'm used to people treating me a certain way and I kind of get my back up about it, but I can see you're not like that. And I'm sorry if I was a little bit hard. And you look at them and you go, absolutely not an issue whatsoever. You're completely entitled to take your time to size me up. And if I ever do anything that pisses you off, just call me out on it. I have no problem with that. Cool? Cool. 9 times out of 10, you can work out conflict. And through the whole process, you never lost control of your energy. You never walked into a situation with the stress of having to defend yourself against something that, let's call it what it is, you're not prepared to deal with. You're not I'd say 99% of artists out there suck at combat. They suck at argument. That's for people who love to get the more high tension stock market lawyer type of jobs, not artists. Now, every now and then, you might be a badass. Maybe you're raised by somebody and you love a good hearty debate. Then cool. But if you're going to be that way, remember, you're in a world with people who might not have your gusto for a good romp, right? So be gentle. Don't come on too strong. Make sure to show your compassionate side to other people so people don't feel too intimidated by you, because that can create an overall very uncomfortable situation. Okay? So hopefully this advice kind of helps you to take a breath and find yourself again, to find your own place and your own energy. It takes you out of this, hopefully, tense situation that you found yourself in, either in the past or the future. And of course, I love you all with all my heart, and happy painting. Take care.